Prince Dash De Rola often gets mentioned in various Rolling Stones biographies as a mysterious young aristocrat who got busted with Brian Jones. Apart from the fact that he and Brian were close friends, little is known about him. A fascinating figure in the 1960s as an actor both in Europe and Hollywood, musician, fashion trendsetter, lover of some of the most beautiful women of the time, and friends with a veritable who's who of pop icons. To this day, he remains a man of wealth and taste.
When we went to the Black Mountains, it was a farm that belonged to the manager of Pink Floyd. It was an interesting group. It was Syd's girlfriend. There was a couple of who make films and do books and so on called Nigel and Jenny Lesmore Gordon. I had this girlfriend called Gay Karen, and Syd and there was 6 of us, and we took acid together, and we took it in a way that I'd never done it before quite like that. We decided that we would hold hands and perform this rite, as it were, this magical rite. And Syd's girlfriend, at one point, who was, I think she was to my right, and she, I mean, this circle of light began to spin one way and then in the other, faster and faster. And you heard people shouting, "Oh, you're just like my grandmother." You know, there was like a patchwork. The energy displaced seemingly in the vision, the perception of things. The molecules of everybody mixed up with everybody else, and people became quite different from what they normally would, their appearance would suggest. And the energy was so intense that this girl at one point let go and collapsed, and it was as if a huge earthenware jar had been struck by with a sledgehammer, and the energy all poured out on one side, and the room literally tipped on its corner. It was a very odd feeling. Suddenly, you know, as in this magical universe, the whole house fell like a dollhouse on its side, and all the furniture tumbled. I recall reaching up above my head, grabbing the master beam and giving it a deft sort of thing, and everything was flung back together in this brief manner. Then we went on through rounds and rounds of bizarre, enchanting, hallucinatory visions. And at one point I recall calling out, "Let, by the power of enchantment, let the entire landscape be covered in white fur." And outside there was snow and mud. And we ran out, and it was like something out of a fairy tale. There was this white ermine-like fur. We rolled around in this stuff, and you might have said, well, had this been, you know, just an acid vision, and, you know, we should have been covered in mud. Well, not only were we not covered in mud, but there was, the next day, there was on my velvet clothes, there were bits of this white fur still remained on it. And so, you know, from some parallel dimension, this whole thing was pulled out. At one point, Syd and I, and we had this thing over girls, and, you know, like peacocks fighting, or male fighting one another, we just stared at one another in a kind of joust. And I remember, while we were doing this, playing this silly little game together, that my attention drifted in the stare, and we found ourselves into this nursery was like a nursery. It was a padded room and everything was very soft and had acetate sort of satin, and Syd's head was on this very large teddy bear, and the teddy bear was like flopped in this corner. And then when we came down, Syd was back in his body, but not quite. And one of the girls exclaimed, "Why, Syd, what's the matter with you, Syd? You're like some weird teddy bear." I remember those words. And Syd picked up this guitar and looked at me, and he played complete, he was such a guitar master. He played this acoustic guitar appallingly badly and all out of tune and everything, and made this jarring noise with it. And he sang, "She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah," in this absurd fashion. And he couldn't be brought back to any kind of sense. And the whole journey was coming to an end on this absurd on this note of utter absurdity, of utter something very, and it occurred to me only much, much later, when Syd never snapped out of it, that the only way, was something out of a Buñuel movie of The Exterminating Angel, that you had to somehow magically retrace your steps to the place where the psychic accident had taken place and retrieve that which was lost on that plane. But it was never done. I never saw Syd again.
So you never saw him again?
Never saw him again. And I heard over the years, but he never got better. Syd had been dropped out of the band, given all his money, given all his possessions away, had gone into this whole crisis. But it was it wasn't an altruistic thing. It was something that came from a psychic crash.